Chapter 635. Oakley frowned, looking like he had a lot on his mind. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. Gu Mingming looked up at Oakley and said, "Just say what you want to say, don't hold it in and cause internal injuries." Oakley hesitated for a moment and said, "This stone tablet, is it really alright to leave it here? What if Cole's men secretly come to snatch it?" Gu Mingming chuckled and said, 36 Stratagems is just an ordinary book in my world and anyone can read it. But knowing how to read and knowing how to use are two completely different concepts. Let's not talk about the fact that the people here don't know these words. Even if they do, how much do they know?" Oakley did not understand and asked, "Didn't you say that Cole knows how to use it?" Gu Mingming looked at Leah and then at Oakley and smiled. "Cole knows how to use 36 stratagems not because he knows how to read, but because his father's generation after generation memorized it and passed it down to him. He may be smart and knows how to use it, but he is obviously not mature enough. To understand these stratagems, you need to use some historical references. 36 stratagems without any historical references is like a martial arts esoterica without any internal techniques. It's just an empty shell and won't be able to kill anyone." Oakley looked at Gu Mingming, not fully understanding, then at Leah. Leah rubbed Gu Mingming's head with a doting expression, then glanced at Oakley and said, "Listen to Gu Mingming's arrangements, you don't need to understand, just do as I say." Oakley still felt uneasy but there was nothing he could do. After thinking for a long while, he looked up and asked, "If something happens in solder that I can't handle, how do I inform you?" Gu Mingming looked at the door and said softly, "Stop hiding, come in." After some rustling, a male with a feminine face walked into the meeting room. He only looked at Gu Mingming from the corner of his eyes and bowed politely, saying, "Saintess." Snake had made her the Saintess of the Snake King Valley and announced that from the moment she took up the position, the meaning of the Saintess would be different from before. Snake had originally promised her to remove this title, but it was too late. Forget it, this title was also a memento left by Snake. Anyway, no one could force her to do anything, Saintess it be. "Wabi, I sent you?" Gu Mingming asked. The snake beast nodded and replied, "Wabi ordered us to stay by your side. If we encounter any trouble, we are to send word back to the Snake King Valley and let them resolve it." Gu Mingming chuckled. She knew very well that Wabi only wanted to protect her because of Snake. "You stay in solder to help Oakley. If you meet with any troublesome situation, you just need a little snake to send a message to Saint Nazir," Gu Mingming said. The snake beast's face darkened. It glanced at Oakley and said reluctantly, "I want to guard the saint." Gu Mingming sneered and slowly activated the Snake King's pressure in her body. The snake beast trembled and knelt down. Its forehead was covered in sweat and it bit its lower lip, not daring to resist. Gu Mingming slowly retracted her pressure and said, "Keep your useless worries and obey my orders." The snake beast replied with a trembling voice, "Yes." Gu Mingming stood up and Elvis carried her up. When he passed by Oakley, Gu Mingming said, "If there are no other problems, I will set off for Saint Nazir 3 days later." Chapter 636. After exiting the meeting room, she saw Huda and his brothers playing with Qixin at the entrance. When they saw Gu Mingming coming out, they all pounced on her. "Mummy." Kanwu was the first to reach Gu Mingming. He raised his little face and asked, "Are we going home?" Gu Mingming wanted to get down from Elvis's arms, but Elvis hugged her even tighter. He looked down at Kanwu from above and did not say a single word, but there was an aura of hurry and get lost. Gu Mingming knew that Elvis was competing with Kanwu again, but she could not embarrass him in front of his son. So she patted Kanwu's little head and replied gently, "Yes, we will set off in 3 days. Are you happy?" Kanwu also completely ignored Elvis. He nodded and said, "I'm happy. I can participate in the hunt with the big tribe on the way back." Jiaoyu also chimed in. "Yes, there are not so many things to do on the way back. Daddy Leah will have time to teach me the art of deduction." Huda looked at Qixin in his arms. He smiled especially amiably and had a maturity that did not match his age. "Will you wake up when we return to a familiar place?" Gu Mingming looked at Qixin without saying a word. She was silently calculating in her heart. What was Cole planning by pushing Burke to her side? Everything had a motive. So what was Cole's motive? It seemed like she had to start with Burke to capture Cole. Gu Mingming turned back to look at Barit. "Call Burke over." Barit nodded. He did not say a word. He just turned around and walked towards the edge of solder. Oriton followed for 2 steps before looking up at Gu Mingming. He said expressionlessly, "I will go hunt and then share a meal." Gu Mingming chuckled. There are so many beauties in Sauter. Have you not taken a liking to any of them? Oriton did not seem to understand what Gu Mingming meant. He looked at her in a daze. He did not speak or move. Gu Mingming said, "Find a suitable female to start a family with. It's not a good idea to always share a meal with me." Oriton said, "I am your guardian beast. I cannot start a family with other females." Gu Mingming shook her head. "You don't like me, do you?" Oriton lowered his head slightly as if he was thinking seriously. Then he shook his head and said, "I like you." Gu Mingming was slightly surprised and asked, "You like me? What do you like about me?" Oriton replied very seriously, "Your family's food is the best." Gu Mingming was taken aback for a moment before she suddenly laughed. Their personalities are so different, but why are they so similar in terms of gluttony? Oriton did not know what Gu Mingming was smiling about. He turned to look at Elvis and realized that his face was filled with gentleness. His pair of blue eyes curved into a curve as Gu Mingming smiled. Oriton could not really understand the feeling of having all his emotions affected by a female. He did not know if all females had this ability or only Gu Mingming had this ability. For someone like him who had almost forgotten his emotions, who knew if he could be saved if he mated with Gu Mingming? One day in the future, would she be able to smile unknowingly like Elvis? Chapter 637. Gu Mingming did not insist any further. She no longer had the passion she had when she helped Sandy and Colin build the bridge. She did not want to interfere too much in other people's lives. When Elvis carried Gu Mingming back to the stone house, Barit and Burke were already waiting at the door. Barit straightened his back when he saw Gu Mingming. His long, soldier-like face had become even more resolute in the past 2 months and he was even more taciturn. It was as if other than in front of Gu Mingming, he did not even open his mouth to speak much. "I've brought her." Barit opened his mouth as if he was reporting for work, concise and to the point. With that, he returned to stand behind Elvis and continued his role as the messenger's guard. He did not speak much and did not steal the limelight. If one did not look closely, he would look like a background version of Gu Mingming. Elvis carried Gu Mingming and sat on the stone steps at the door. Leah swayed his tail and walked past Burke. He paused for a moment and chuckled. He did not say anything and just walked to the simple stove to start a fire. Gu Mingming sat in Elvis's arms lazily. She glanced sideways at Burke and smiled. 3 days later, I will be returning to St. Nazaire. You and your tribesmen can follow me back. Burke clenched his fists by the sides of his body and slowly released them. He did not dare to look straight at Gu Mingming and could only stare at her shadow that was elongated by the sun. Frowning, he replied, "Can we stay in Sauter? My tribesmen are already too old, they cannot withstand the frequent travel." Gu Mingming was taken aback. "You're not coming with me?" Gu Mingming asked. Could it be that Cole's motive for arranging for Burke to come here was not for her but to regain control of Sauter? Burke shook his head with difficulty. "I want to go with you, but if I leave, there will be no one to provide food for my tribesmen." Originally, the 2 half-orc females in our tribe could recruit family members through mating after joining a new tribe and continue to take care of our tribesmen. But Sauter did not lack females at all. How could 2 half-orc females snatch resources from the group of complete females who were at the top of the tribes? Even Maya and Sandy, who were considered average-level half-orc females, did not manage to recruit a single new member after coming to Sauter, let alone the old, weak, sick and disabled who were burdened with their entire families. Of course, Sandy was very satisfied with Colin and wouldn't give any other male a chance. Otherwise, just based on her identity as the best friend of the messenger of the beast deity, there would still be people who would be willing to mate with her. Gu Mingming nodded and did not force him. "Since that's the case, I won't force you. You can go back." Burke secretly lifted his eyes and stared deeply at Gu Mingming. Her lonely appearance in the rain made him toss and turn in bed, unable to sleep. He couldn't tell if what he saw on her face that day were tears or rain, but those clear eyes were calm without a trace of emotion. It made his heart ache and made him want to protect her. If he could, he wanted to stay by her side regardless of everything. He didn't want to let her sit alone in the rain, and he didn't want her to have any time to be lonely. But, in the end, Burke only replied with a "okay." He then turned around and left with heavy footsteps. Chapter 638. Leah put down the work in his hands and walked to Gu Mingming's side. He hooked Gu Mingming's chin with his slender fingers and squinted his eyes with a resentful expression. "You are so familiar with his scent, why do I feel so unhappy?" This meant that Gu Mingming did not smell wrongly. Chuckling, Gu Mingming glanced sideways at Barit and said, Seems like you have to stay behind this time. Barit turned his head and looked at the direction where Burke had disappeared to. Stay behind and watch him? Gu Mingming shook her head and said, stay behind and help me protect Oakley. If he loses control, at least the two of you have to run back to St. Nazir alive. Barit retracted his gaze and looked at Gu Mingming. He pursed his lips and finally replied, all right. But Leah did not give up. He pinched Gu Mingming's chin back and looked straight into her eyes. What do you plan to do after you catch him? Gu Mingming laughed softly and said, I also don't know, how far can I go for my son? Leah raised his head and asked, what if he requests to be your beast pet? Will you agree to him for Qishuan's sake? Gu Mingming looked up and stared straight into Li's eyes. Beast pet? I'm afraid he doesn't have the guts to make such a request. Leah continued asking, what if he does? What do you plan to do? Gu Mingming's shoulders trembled as she smiled sinisterly. Her gaze was cold as she said, if he does, I'll agree to him. Let's see if he has the life to enjoy the poison in my body. Gu Mingming frowned as she felt a slight pain in her chin and shoulder. But she did not resist. Elvis's voice exploded above her head like a subwoofer, hitting Gu Mingming's heart with every word. I'm not dead yet. Leah held Gu Mingming's little face. There was a smile on his devilish and fairy-like face, but why did it look like a layer of ice had formed on his smile? I'm still alive too. Gu Mingming smiled embarrassedly. I know. I was just saying casually. Li's smile grew colder and colder. Even though his voice was calm, it gave off an oppressive feeling as if a storm was brewing. It was as if the air pressure within a radius of 100 meters around Leah had been pulled down. His body leaned forward slightly and his entire body enveloped Gu Mingming. His long and narrow eyes were filled with a dangerous and fatal seductive aura. His dark red lips parted slightly, bringing with it a unique fragrance, just like the flowers on the other shore, causing one's imagination to run wild. The two of us are not so useless that we need to sacrifice our own females to solve the problem. Leah was only a third-level beast, right? Gu Mingming was uncertain for a moment. Was her power above Li's now? Gu Mingming. Gu. Mingming is and Gu us. Her lips were sealed by Elvis and his tongue entered her mouth, robbing her of all the fragrance. Gu Mingming felt a numbing sensation on her neck. She glanced sideways and realized that Leah was nibbling on her neck. His strength was neither light nor heavy. It was slightly painful but not injurious. It was filled with lust and punishment. After a long while, when Gu Mingming's entire body turned limp, the two of them released her in unison. Chapter 639. Barit is still watching. You two. Stop fooling around. Gu Mingming could not even complete her sentence. Elvis and Leah were messing around with her body as if they had planned it beforehand, causing her heart to beat erratically. Barit silently lowered his head and said, I'll go to Oakley's and inform him. Barit only left Gu Mingming with a resolute back view. He liked Gu Mingming, he had liked her ever since she came to the tribe. But he knew that protecting her as a guard was already the closest he could get. Elvis and Leah would not give him a chance to improve. If he was too greedy, the two of them would definitely not tolerate him. So, knowing when to leave was the only way for him to stay by her side. After Barit left, Elvis and Leah finally let Gu Mingming off after she repeatedly begged for mercy. Don't say such things again. Or else I will personally kill Qishuan. Elvis said coldly. Gu Mingming pursed her lips, her gaze cold. This was the second time he said he wanted to kill her sons. Previously it was Kanwu, this time it was Qishuan. Why were her sons so lowly in his eyes? Elvis seemed to know what Gu Mingming was thinking about. He straightened her body and made her sit face to face with him. Then he said cautiously, compared to you, everything else in this world is insignificant. So is the tribe, so is my sons, and so am I. You have become like this because of them, and that is the limit of my tolerance. If you continue to place yourself as a sacrifice for them, I can only kill them personally to protect you. If you dare to touch my sons, I will hate you. Gu Mingming's face was filled with anger as she said unhappily. Elvis smiled bitterly and said, I know. If you hate me, I will live a life worse than death. But compared to you, my pain is not worth mentioning. Gu Mingming lowered her head and looked at her own knees. This pair of legs were exchanged for by Snake's life. She knew better than anyone else how stubborn the males in the beast world were in love, wasn't that so? If you want, Leah and I are willing to risk our lives to accompany you for one night. Elvis hooked Gu Mingming's lips and kissed her lips. Different from the punishment kiss just now, this kiss was extremely gentle. After the kiss, Gu Mingming even felt that her brain was lacking oxygen and her breathing was not smooth. Elvis hugged her shoulders and placed her on his chest. While giving her support, he did not let her discover the wound in his eyes. If you want a few more partners, Barit, Oriton and Ian are all good choices. But, don't let it be Cole. He's not worthy. Gu Mingming leaned into Elvis's arms and chuckled. I know, I don't want any more partners and I won't take Cole in as a beast pet. It's just something I said in a moment of anger. Why take it so seriously? Leah squatted in front of Gu Mingming with one knee on the ground. He placed Gu Mingming's little hand by his lips and kissed it. Then he looked straight into Gu Mingming's eyes and said, if it can make you happy, we don't mind having a few more family members. It didn't matter if it was a partner or a pet as long as it could make you happy. But, don't let it be Cole, he's too dangerous and dirty. Gu Mingming smiled and said, you and Elvis are enough for me. I don't need any more partners or beast pets. Barit, Oriton, Ian, I don't want any of them. Cole. Needless to say. Don't worry, alright? Aside from the topic. Chapter 640. 3 days later, Gu Mingming set off for St. Nazaire. Other than Oakley and Barit, the rest of the St. Nazaire tribesmen who had migrated over during the attack on Cole followed Gu Mingming. A few of the snow foxes also wanted to follow Gu Mingming back to St. Nazaire, but were stopped by Leah using the 2 stone tablets. The 16 valued females, Maya and Sandy, 18 big families and some single males who had yet to mate, walked out of Sauter's main entrance in a majestic manner. Looking back, Oakley, Barit and the snake beast sent by Wabi were standing at the door like abandoned dogs, looking at them from afar. Gu Mingming sighed softly and turned back. Elvis tightened his arms around her waist and asked, worried? Gu Mingming nodded and said, Barit is just a 3rd-level beast. If he really meets Cole, he can't even protect himself. How can he protect Oakley? I just feel it's too risky. Elvis said, should we send someone to the Snake King Valley to send a message and invite Wabi over to protect them in secret? Gu Mingming thought for a moment and shook her head, saying, let's not talk about how Cole wouldn't dare to show himself if Wabi is around. Also with Wabi's temper. I'm afraid that Barit and Oakley will die in Wabi's hands before Cole arrives. Leah walked beside Elvis and held Gu Mingming's little hand, saying, if you are really worried, I will call the 2 of them over and return to St. Nazaire together. Let's leave Sauter to those few old things. If Cole's motive is to snatch Sauter back, then it would be more beneficial for Cole if the 2 of them are not around. Gu Mingming shook her head and said, Cole clearly knows that I have already found out that Burke was instigated by him to come to Sauter. If I am not prepared at all, it will only arouse his suspicions. Elvis said slowly, being too perfect in itself is a loophole? Gu Mingming nodded and did not say a word. She just went through the plan again in her mind and tried to think through the details more clearly so that she could deal with it. The speed of the large group was much slower than when Elvis, Leah and Gu Mingming were traveling alone. Females were delicate and could not stand the long journey. Although they had experienced it last time and were much better this time, the morning's journey had made them complain incessantly. Gu Mingming was not really in a hurry to rush back to St. Nazaire, so she found a better place in the forest in the afternoon and ordered them to rest on the spot. The males went hunting while the females gathered around Gu Mingming. On the other hand, their partners could only sit on the outermost edge of the females' group to protect her. They couldn't even get close to their own female. Even Elvis and Leah were pushed out by these females. Gu Mingming gave them a reassuring smile, then sat among the group of females and chatted with them to soothe their emotions. Great messenger, I've heard Sandy talk about you and Jean before, but I'm still very curious. Can you tell us more? The one speaking was Mandy, the first beauty of the beast world that Gu Mingming had chosen. Gu Mingming chuckled and shook her head. You guys have heard the story of Jean so many times, aren't you sick of it? Mandy's eyes brightened. She leaned closer to Gu Mingming and asked, Great messenger, from what you said, does it mean that you have other stories to tell us? Gu Mingming chuckled. Looking at the 18 pairs of big eyes that were shining with anticipation, she could only nod her head and say, Yeah, let me tell you a short story. The beginning of the story was about a fish that fell in love with a flying bird. Digression, the story of the bird and fish. A long, long time ago, a fish and a bird fell in love. But God told them that they would never be lovers. Even becoming friends was an extravagant wish. Even if they loved each other, this lifetime was unattainable. The fish hated the restraints of the seawater and longed for the feeling of being free and aloof in the blue sky. The bird hated the empty blue sky and longed to bathe in the seawater and walk in it. Chapter 641. Although it was a story, it was actually just a script for a play that Gu Mingming had performed in the past when she was working at the amusement park. The entire play was about 40 minutes long, but with Gu Mingming narrating it alone, it was at most 10 minutes long. The people who went hunting returned one after another. From afar, Gu Mingming could see her 2 meat buns mixed in with the group. Jiaoyu stayed behind to take care of Qixin and pestered Leah to tell him some deductions, so he did not go hunting with them. Meanwhile, Huda and Kanwo followed the rest of the group. Seeing her sons, Gu Mingming's expression became much gentler. She clapped her hands and said, "All right ladies, today's story ends here. Everyone go back to your own males and have a good rest. After dinner we will continue our journey in the afternoon." The females still wanted to hear more stories, but did not dare to pester them too much. Mandy and Sandy each took the lead to evacuate a few females before the rest of the group dispersed one after another. Mandy stood behind Gu Mingming, feeling rather bashful. She tugged at Gu Mingming's skirt and asked softly, "That flying bird that fell in love with the fish, is it Ian?" Gu Mingming was stunned for a moment, before shaking her head in exasperation. Everything about the beast world was good, except for this habit of letting one's imagination run wild. Gu Mingming gently held Mandy's shoulders and said, "That's just a story, don't think too much about it. Hurry and go back. Your males are still waiting." Mandy nodded, but her eyes secretly peeked up at the treetops. Gu Mingming knew that this clearly meant that Ian was one of the main characters in the story. Forget it, let her fantasize all she wants. After sending Mandy off, the 2 meat buns that had returned from hunting ran to Gu Mingming. "Mummy here." Kamwa's speed was always faster. Although Huda was the big brother, he was not Kamwa's match in terms of stamina. When Kamwa ran to Gu Mingming, Huda was still 5 to 6 meters behind him. Gu Mingming looked at the dead rabbit and gently rubbed Kamwa's head, saying, Kamwa is really awesome. Rabbits were agile, so it was very difficult to catch them. You are really amazing." Kamwa was extremely enraged after receiving the compliment. His azure blue eyes seemed to stare at Elvis. He clearly had a young and tender face, but it had an inexplicable sense of provocation. Elvis clenched his teeth and walked to Kamwa's side. He grabbed the back of his neck and lifted him up to eye level, saying coldly, "Don't you know the rules?" Kamwa bared his fangs and brandished his claws, but he could not even touch a single strand of Elvis's hair. Gritting his teeth, he said, "The prey is for my mother, it's fine as long as my mother likes it, why are you so nosy?" Elvis pinched Kamwa's face and forcefully turned his head to look at the dead rabbit. Then he said coldly, word by word, "Do you think my wife would like that ugly piece of trash whose skin and flesh were all torn apart?" Kamwa's face twitched. Kamwa choked and could not say a word. It was his first time participating in a hunt, and that rabbit was indeed too cunning, so, his death was a little tragic, but he still felt indignant after hearing Elvis's words. Kamwa's eyes lit up. Seeing that her son was about to cry from Elvis's words, Kamwa did not want to cry at all, it was purely his mother's imagination. Gu Mingming hurriedly stood up and grabbed the rabbit's ears. She chuckled, "Ha ha ha. I really want to eat rabbits today. Not bad, not bad." Aside from the topic, the story of bird and fish, the fish did not want to give up because it felt the blue sky calling it. The bird did not want to give up because it felt that the sea was its true home. Just like that, the fish and the bird kept trying to get closer, but in the process of getting closer to their dreams, they were getting closer to death. The fish said to the bird, "You were originally in the sky, you should be flying around." The bird said to the fish, "You were originally in the sea, you should be swimming around." The fish said to the bird, "If birds and fish can love each other, then where should we build our nests?" The fish's tears fell into the sea. The bird said to the fish, "Look at me, I will tell you the answer." The bird flew up into the sky for the last time. Chapter 642. Elvis casually threw Kanwu aside and took over the bloody rabbit from Gu Mingming's hands. "I'll help you hunt a giant rabbit, Gu Mingming nudged Elvis's chest lightly and said softly, "It's my son's first time hunting and he gave me his prey. Can you not hurt our child?" Elvis raised his brow. "It's already not good, can't I tell the truth?" Gu Mingming looked at Elvis in rebuke. Elvis took a deep breath and wiped off the blood on Gu Mingming's fingers. "You're glaring at me because of him again? I really hate them more and more." Gu Mingming said, "Hubby." Camel walked forward and hugged Gu Mingming's thigh. He raised his little face and said seriously, "Mummy, don't be sad. It's alright if he hates me, I don't like him anyway." Gu Mingming's lips twitched. They were really biological father and son. Identification complete. Elvis ignored Kanwu and only instructed Leah before running into the depths of the forest. Huda held onto a wild bird's neck and stood 2 steps away. He was hesitating if he should go closer. Gu Mingming waved her hand and called Huda over. She touched his sweaty little face and asked, "What did you hunt? Let Mummy take a look too." Huda placed the wild bird in front of Gu Mingming. "My prey is not even as good as Kanwu's," Gu Mingming chuckled. "Both of you are great. It's already not bad to have such results on your first hunt." Huda said, "But Beast Father said," Gu Mingming pinched the cheeks of her 2 sons. "Beast Father is using his own method to motivate you and hope that you can do better. Don't be sad. He doesn't really despise you." Kanwu sighed and acted like a little adult. He ran away after getting into trouble and still needs Mummy to help him clean up. Sigh, when can he be more reliable? Gu Mingming laughed at Kanwu's words. She hugged him and kissed him. "Beast Father is afraid that we don't have enough food, so he went to replenish our prey." Kanwu hugged Gu Mingming's neck and kissed her on the cheek. Then he looked at Gu Mingming seriously with his azure blue eyes and said, "Forget it, don't help him explain. You already have enough troubles with such an unreliable first partner. But it doesn't matter. The 4 of us will grow up as soon as possible. At that time you don't have to count on him. The 4 of us will protect you." Gu Mingming chuckled and nodded. "All right, I'll wait for my precious sons to grow up and protect me." Leah swayed his big tail as he held Jiaoyu's hand and walked over. With a light flick of his hand, Jiaoyu carried Qixin and stood together with Huda and Kanwu. Leah slowly squatted down beside Gu Mingming, wrapping his furry tail around her waist and pulling her into his arms. Resting his chin on his hands, he smiled amiably and said, "Brat, are you seducing my female?" Gu Mingming's face darkened. She slapped Lee's face and said, "Watch your words. He is my son." Kanwu sighed and shook his head. He placed one hand on Gu Mingming's shoulder and said earnestly, "Mummy, why don't you consider taking in a few more normal males? Like Bode or Colin from mother-in-law's family. Those who are not sick in the head." Chapter 643. Lee's nonchalant words made Yuan Sherwu's hair stand on end. Today was the first time he had gone hunting with his tribesmen. It was nerve-wracking and exciting. Although he had only hunted a small rabbit and there was still a lot of room for improvement in his skills, but he had received a compliment from his mother. Not allowing him to go hunting from now on? Why not just chop off his 4 limbs and be done with it? He bared his teeth at Leah, looking like he was about to explode. He felt that if Leah was not carrying Gu Mingming in his arms, Kanwu would definitely pounce on him and bite him. Jiaoyu tugged at Kanwu lightly and whispered something into his ear. Kanwu paused for a moment and smiled sneakily for a second. Then he instantly lost his temper and sat on the ground. He lifted his little face and looked at Gu Mingming with a pair of watery blue eyes, melting Gu Mingming's heart. He sniffled and pouted, looking like he was about to cry but could not. "Mummy, do you not like the little rabbit I hunted? You also despise the prey I gave you, right? So whoa. Jiaoyu's little scheme was too obvious in Gu Mingming's eyes. But seeing through everything did not stop her from feeling sorry for her son. Gu Mingming pinched Leah and struggled out of his arms to hug Kanwu. She comforted him softly. "Kanwu, be good. Kanwu, don't cry. Mummy really likes the prey Kanwu gave to Mummy. You have done very well. Mummy is proud of you." Kanwu said, Whoa, but I can't hunt any more for Mummy. Sob. Can I no longer receive Mummy's compliments? Can I no longer take care of Mummy? Then I will be abandoned by Mummy and become a wild wolf that no one wants? Sob. Mummy." Kanwu's unreasonable crying was, strictly speaking, illogical. But which mother in this world would not feel heartwarming when she heard her son trying so hard to take care of her, trying so hard to prove his capabilities in front of her? Gu Mingming patted Kanwu's back lightly. Then she tilted her head and stood on Kanwu's side without any principles. She glared at Leah and said with slight annoyance, "It's fine if Elvis is like this, but why are you like this too? What's the point of abusing your power to threaten a kid?" Leah was stunned for a moment after being scolded by Gu Mingming. He then smiled brightly and leaned his handsome face in front of Gu Mingming, the tip of his nose touching Gu Mingming's, as if he could not wait to see Gu Mingming in his eyes. The 2 pure white fox ears on the top of his head twitched twice, his voice ambiguous and excited. The moment he opened his thin lips, Lee's unique warm breath sprayed onto Gu Mingming's face, making her feel sentimental. "Mingming, you look so attractive when you are angry." Gu Mingming blushed at Lee's actions and instinctively took a step back. But Leah did not give up. His large tail quickly occupied her waist and pulled her towards him. He supported the back of her head with one hand and slid his other hand down her arm to her palm. He opened his fingers and slipped them through the gaps between her fingers. With one grip, all 10 fingers were locked tightly. If you're angry, do you want me to pull your ears? Gu Mingming's entire body stiffened from Li's actions, but she did not know what to do. She turned around to seek help from her sons, only to see Jiaoyu Sai and Pat Kanwu saying, "Forget it, don't bother with a masochist. A normal person will never win against a lunatic." Chapter 644. The 4 sons sighed and walked away quietly. Gu Mingming facepalmed. What happened to the promised fatherly love and tall and lofty image? Why were these 2 fellows in her family disliked by their sons one after another? Was there really something wrong with her taste in men? Gu Mingming felt a deep sadness. Elvis did not need too much time to hunt, so not long after the 4 little ones left, Elvis was already carrying a huge rabbit that was 3 times the size of his human form back. Gu Mingming felt it was quite novel to see a whole prey after such a long time. Pushing Leah away, Gu Mingming walked to Elvis and looked at the owner who had purposely placed his prey beside Kanwa's little rabbit. Then, Elvis prodded the huge rabbit's skull with one hand and placed his palm on his temple. He sighed and said, "Is it a sense of achievement to win against your own sons?" Elvis hugged Gu Mingming into his arms and kissed her forehead gently. Then he said, "We have to let him know who is the boss in this family." Gu Mingming shook her head helplessly and said, "Do you know that you and Leah are already 2 perverts in our sons' hearts?" Elvis shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly and said, "Let them think whatever they want, I don't care." Gu Mingming sighed helplessly and accepted her fate. She did not force it. Leah leaned over and placed one hand on Elvis's shoulder while the other hand stroked his own tail in boredom. He said, I was reprimanded just now." Elvis frowned and looked at Leah with a serious expression. He asked, "Really? Xiaoming reprimanded you?" Li's eyes lit up and he nodded his head excitedly. It was as if being scolded was an extremely honorable thing. Elvis was also a little agitated. He asked, "Anything else? Did you take action?" Li's gaze darkened and he shook his head dejectedly. "No." Elvis also sighed softly and said regretfully, "Forget it, it's already not easy to lose your temper and reprimand someone. This is a good thing. Maybe we can take action next time." A thick sign was flashing on Gu Mingming's forehead. No wonder her sons said that they were psychopaths who had masochistic tendencies. It was one thing for him to think of ways to make her happy every day, but now he had given up on himself to the point where he could be proud of making her angry? Gu Mingming took 2 steps forward and stretched out her 2 little black hands. She grabbed Elvis's ears with her left hand and Li's right and pulled them towards her. She asked with a smile, "How is it? Are you satisfied?" The eyes of the wolf and fox, whose ears had been twisted, lit up. They were like lottery winners sitting in front of the TV who had won the first prize. He hugged Gu Mingming excitedly, one black and one white, sandwiching Gu Mingming in the middle, forming a human wolf-fox sandwich. "I can't breathe." Gu Mingming roared with a face full of despair. Elvis and Leah then calmed down and released her. Leah held onto Gu Mingming's shoulders and said, "That's great, Gu Mingming, you can finally be angry. During this period of time, you haven't laughed or made a fuss. It's making my heart ache. It's good that you're angry. It's good that you have mood swings. I'll go cook for you. It'll be ready soon." With that, Leah kissed Gu Mingming's face heavily. Then he swayed his tail and went to deal with the giant rabbit. It was not an exaggeration to say that Gu Mingming saw countless blooming flowers spinning around Leah. Chapter 645. After 3 days of journey, they had already covered half of the distance from Sadr to Saint Nazaire. The closer they were to Saint Nazaire, the more uneasy Gu Mingming felt. She always felt that there was a pair of eyes watching her in the dark, but she couldn't find anyone when she checked in private. Even Ian, who was hovering in the air, did not notice anything suspicious, so Gu Mingming could not help but attribute it all to homesickness. At night, a bright moon hung in the sky. The bright moonlight revealed a trace of coldness, like a white gauze curtain enveloping everything in the night. The verdant and tall ancient trees exuded a strange atmosphere in the darkness, causing people to involuntarily feel a sense of awe. Everything was quiet. It was a night suitable for a good sleep. Suddenly, a shrill howl tore apart the silence. Gu Mingming opened her eyes abruptly. Elvis and Leah had already stood on her left and right, protecting her securely. Gu Mingming frowned and asked, "What's going on?" Elvis gave Leah a look and Leah immediately leaped out and started to control the scene. With families as units, the males surrounded their females in the middle to protect them. Elvis looked around warily as he replied, "They are stray beasts." Stray beasts? Gu Mingming's knowledge of these three words was limited. She only knew that it was an exiled orc, cold-blooded and heartless. The only time she had seen it was not long after they had mated. A few stray beasts were lured into the cave by her singing. Elvis was severely injured and unconscious at that time. Leah stayed in her cave. Gu Mingming felt a wave of disgust as she recalled the scenes of them eating her comrades. Frowning, he asked, "Can't we just expel it with our beast pressure?" Elvis said, "If it's only the two of us, this method would be the simplest and most effective." But Elvis's gaze swept across the crowd, especially the 18-week females, who were so frightened by the stray beast's voice that they almost burst into tears. "If we release our beast pressure before the stray beasts are scared away, half of them would be scared to death." Gu Mingming frowned in frustration and sighed. "Go and help Leah. Do your best to protect the tribesmen. Don't worry about me. No one in the beast world is my match now." Elvis hesitated for a moment but still nodded his head. He did not care what would happen to Saint Nazir, but he knew that she cared. Elvis and Leah arranged the defense as quickly as possible based on their tacit understanding. Ian led the Eagle Owl tribe and circled twice in the sky. With a caw, they pointed out the enemy's location. Elvis frowned and cursed softly, "Damn it, we're already surrounded." Elvis, Leah and Oriton formed a triangle and guarded the outermost edge. Ian led the Eagle Owl tribe to control the overall situation in the air, waiting for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Gu Mingming narrowed her eyes and clenched her fists tightly. She looked at the pairs of ghostly green eyes closing in on her from all directions. There were quite a few of them and they were all level 3 or 4. Releasing beast pressure was the simplest method, but the fighting members would definitely fall to the ground before the other side. What to do? While Gu Mingming was thinking, the battle had already begun. Chapter 646. 7 to 8 4th-level orcs were trapping Elvis tightly. Elvis could not casually unleash his beast pressure, or else the beast pressure from these few 4th-level beasts would be enough to suppress 80% of his fighting power. Physical combat was the only way out. But even though he was strong, it was not easy for him to escape from the stray beast's reckless fighting style. Leah maintained absolute calmness during the battle. Even though it was a little strenuous for him to face 2 3rd-level orcs, he did not retreat a single step and defended a corner with all his might. The Eagle Owl tribe led by Ian circled in the sky, occasionally swooping down to catch a stray beast that was alone. Then they would quickly return to the sky and use their sharp claws to tear the stray beasts to shreds before landing heavily on the ground. Oriton was used to the stray beast's fighting style, so he was evenly matched with a 4th-level orc. No one had the upper hand. Colin and Sandy had leveled up to 3rd level after mating. Perhaps it was because he did not participate in the previous battle, he seemed to be fighting with all his might this time. But the difference in levels was absolute. Against a 4th-level stray beast, Colin's body was quickly covered in wounds of varying degrees. The rest also fought fiercely with their families as a unit. The scene was bloody and violent, with broken limbs flying in front of Gu Mingming's eyes. She thought she would be afraid, but the heat in her heart was not fear, but excitement. She wanted to participate in the battle, and even tear the enemies apart with her own hands. Gu Mingming was very clear that this excitement did not belong to her, but to Snake's boiling blood that had settled in her body. Sandy's face was pale with fright, and she clutched tightly onto the corner of Gu Mingming's clothes, unwilling to let go. Gu Mingming pursed her lips and stuffed the bun that was guarding her in place of Elvis into Sandy's arms, saying, "Help me look after these 4. Lowering her head, Gu Mingming was stunned for a moment. Then an explosion sounded in her head, as if a bolt of lightning had struck her brain. "Where's Kanwo?" Gu Mingming asked angrily. Huda carried Qixuan in his arms, shielding Jiaoyu behind him. He was clearly very afraid, but he still had to pretend to be calm and protect his brother. Hearing Gu Mingming's question, he then realized that Kanwo had disappeared. He looked around frantically, but there was killing and blood everywhere. Huda's tiny body kept trembling as if his throat was locked, he could not say a single word. Gu Mingming frowned and squatted down to look straight at Huda. She held onto his little shoulders and said, "Huda, Mummy is going to look for Kanwo now. You are the eldest, you have to take good care of your younger brothers. Before Mom comes back, find a place to hide and protect yourself and Aunt Sandy, okay?" Hutta trembled and nodded, clearly afraid but still determined. He was the eldest brother and he could not be weak at this time. Gu Mingming looked up at Sandy and said, "Help me take care of the child, I will be back soon." Sandy nodded with much difficulty, tears welling up in her eyes. She was clearly so scared that she wanted to cry, but she still let go of Gu Mingming's hand. Biting her lips, she reminded, "You have to be careful." Gu Mingming did not hear Sandy's reminder. Because after leaving that sentence, Gu Mingming had already turned and dashed into the battlefield filled with killing. She did not have sharp fangs or claws, but she opened up a bloody path. As she walked past, she accurately slapped all the stray beasts to the ground. Chapter 647. Gu Mingming's eyes kept searching for Kanwa's figure amidst the chaotic killing. A wild jackal with bloodshot eyes leaped up after biting off an orc's throat, pouncing towards Gu Mingming. Gu Mingming's eyes did not see the incoming danger. Instead, her body reacted instinctively based on Rasnella's battle memories. She lifted one leg in an instant, and the moment her height exceeded the jackal, she slammed it down harshly. Her heel directly smashed onto the jackal's nose, creating a huge pit when it landed on the ground. Gu Mingming did not lower her head to look, but continued searching for Kanwu. The jackal only had half a head left, and its brain matter was splattered everywhere. However, no one showed any mercy. Gu Mingming did not emit her beast pressure but still attracted the attention of the stray beasts like a magnet. Perhaps it was because a female walking around in the battlefield was too eye-catching that the stray beasts all resorted to extreme attacks to get rid of the entanglement in front of them. They then surrounded Gu Mingming in twos and threes. Elvis was afraid that Gu Mingming would be hurt. His eyes were bloodshot and he could not care less about hurting himself. He released his beast pressure and instantly suppressed the few fourth-level orcs surrounding him. He then quickly ran to Gu Mingming's side and protected her in his arms. "Why did you run out? Are you hurt?" Gu Mingming's gaze was still darting around. She said anxiously, "Kanwu is missing. I want to find him." Elvis frowned and his eyes shone fiercely. "You are putting yourself in danger for that little wolf pup again." Gu Mingming pushed Elvis's hand away. She raised her leg and kicked away the stray beast that had recovered from Elvis's beast pressure and was about to attack her from behind. She then shook her head and looked at Elvis. "This level of attack is not dangerous to me." Elvis clenched his teeth and said harshly, "The most regretful thing I have done in my life is to let you give birth to them." Elvis carried Gu Mingming by the waist and spun her around to protect her against his chest. He turned around abruptly and glared at the bloody beast less than an inch away from his neck with his bloodshot eyes. He squeezed out two words through his teeth. "You're courting death." The thick tail was like a steel whip as it viciously lashed at the waist of the ambusher. The stray beast was sent flying 7 to 8 steps away, its intestines and innards scattered along the way, finally disappearing into the bloody ground. Gu Mingming separated herself from Elvis's arms and said, "Let's split up and search. We must find Kanwu safe and sound. I can't have another son whose life is uncertain." Elvis really wanted to bite Kanwu to death after finding him, but when he met Gu Mingming's worried eyes, he still nodded. He frowned and said, "You're not allowed to get hurt." Gu Mingming nodded in agreement. "I know. You be careful too." With that, Gu Mingming continued to look for Kanwu in another direction. On the other hand, Elvis clenched his fists and forced himself to turn around as well. He wanted to find that bastard son who was courting death on the battlefield as soon as possible. Only then could Gu Mingming stay at the back with peace of mind and not enter this filthy and bloody battlefield. A white figure flashed into Gu Mingming's eyes. The snow fox that was supposed to be spotlessly white was now covered in a sinister red color. Its flesh was flipped and blood was flowing out. Leah was injured. Chapter 648. If this bite landed, even if Leah did not die, he would be severely injured. At that critical moment, Gu Mingming clenched her fists tightly and her body shook. Instantly, the world shook and everything started to double up. No matter what level the orcs were at, they all fell to the ground at the same time. Worry and fear controlled Gu Mingming's emotions. She released her beast pressure unconsciously and did not even realize that Li's danger had been resolved. A warm embrace hugged the explosive Gu Mingming tightly and a gentle voice rang beside her ear. "Xiaoming, it's all right now. Don't be scared, don't be scared." Elvis spat out a mouthful of blood from behind Gu Mingming's ear. The blood stung Gu Mingming's eyes and instantly brought her back to her senses. Turning around, she saw Elvis's weak but relieved smile slowly falling down. Gu Mingming reached out to grab him but could not grab hold of Elvis's body. She could only watch as Elvis turned from his human form into a black wolf and fell down slowly, brushing against her fingertips. The entire battlefield was silent in an instant. There was not a single trace of the bloodbath and howls from a moment ago. Gu Mingming stood on the ground that was soaked in blood and lowered her head. However, she could not differentiate those who fainted from her beast pressure and those were already dead corpses. The moonlight was still hazy and it was like a veil that shrouded the wailing battlefield, adding a sense of coldness and mystery to the bloody scene. Gu Mingming stood in the moonlight and her legs felt as heavy as lead. She clearly knew that she had lost control at that moment. If Elvis had not hugged her, by the time she regained her senses, she would have been the only living thing here. Gu Mingming just stared blankly at everything, her gaze wooden and empty. Silence, the world was so silent that even the wind did not dare to enter this cruel scene. Suddenly, her vision blurred and Gu Mingming fainted on the ground without any warning, as if she was a puppet whose soul had been sucked out. Under the moonlight, a person walked towards her from afar. A pair of fox ears were rather conspicuous as he walked towards Gu Mingming step by step from the pile of corpses. He was calm and elegant, his gaze gentle and persistent, as if he was not stepping on a ground full of corpses but a path full of fresh flowers. Walking to Gu Mingming's side, he bent one knee to touch the ground, his slender fingers gently caressing Gu Mingming's cheeks. He smiled dotingly and indulgently, his cold voice carrying a tinge of malice, as if he was a stubborn husband indulging his beloved wife to fool around. He said, "Ah Gu, don't be anxious. I will let you slowly see that only I, Cole, am qualified to stand by your side in this world. I will stand at the top of the world with you and look down on everyone. It won't be long before you'll get tired of these pieces of trash that are holding you back, and then kill them with your own hands. I will plan everything for you and then stand at the most dazzling place, waiting for you to come to my side." As Cole said, he slowly bent down wanting to kiss Gu Mingming's cheek. However, when he was only an arm's length away, he felt an intense pain on his face. Cole paused for a moment and stepped back. When he touched his face again, it had already started to rot. Cole clutched his wound and stared fiercely at the snake-shaped mark on the back of Gu Mingming's neck. His eyes were filled with venom as he said coldly, "Snake, you're still hindering me even after you're dead. One day, Agu will cut off your mark for me and let you completely become a dead snake." Dead snake. Aside from the topic, today's update has ended. Babies, there are still 4 more days before February ends. Chapter 649. Swaying. The whole world was swaying. Everyone fell one by one in front of Gu Mingming, be it enemy or friend. The blood droplets seemed to be flowing in reverse, floating up from the ground drop by drop, hovering in the air to form a huge blood ball of the same size as the moon. Then it exploded in an instant, and all the blood pierced towards Gu Mingming like sharp kunai. Gu Mingming stood rooted to the ground, unable to move, and could only watch as the blood blades shot towards her eyes. A mouthful of fresh blood sprayed onto Gu Mingming's face, and the familiar smiling face became increasingly blurry in front of her. His slender fingers gently caressed her face, and a weak voice that was almost inaudible rang beside Gu Mingming's ears. "Mingming, it's good that you're all right." The originally fluffy and white tail was filled with mud, and Li's devil-like face slowly slid down in front of Gu Mingming. Gu Mingming's throat seemed to be tightly locked by something, and she could neither cry nor move. She could only watch as Leah fell into the pool of snow, with a pair of long and affectionate eyes still staring at her with a smile. Even though it was dim and lifeless, it still could not conceal the sense of relief and heartache. "Leah." Gu Mingming suddenly sat up, her head full of sweat accompanied by a sense of dizziness. She tilted her body and fell into a warm embrace. The furry tail was gently stuffed into her arms, and Gu Mingming instinctively hugged it tightly. Turning her head, she looked at the smiling face right in front of her with misty eyes, and heard him saying gently, "Mingming, I'm here." Gu Mingming pounced into Li's arms, crying out loud. That dream was too realistic. It was as if she had really experienced Li's death once. "Mingming, don't be afraid, it's all right now." Leah hugged Gu Mingming lightly, patting her back gently, soothing her emotions. After crying for a while, Gu Mingming finally calmed down and sobbed, "I dreamed that you died." Leah chuckled softly, using his fingers to lift Gu Mingming's chin. His long and narrow eyes were deep and affectionate, and his voice was as gentle as the spring breeze. His thin lips parted slightly. "You saved me so I won't die. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid." "I saved you?" Gu Mingming was stunned for a moment before she recalled that fight. The last thing she remembered was a stray beast pouncing at the heavily injured Leah. Leah barely dodged it but exposed his abdomen to the other stray beast. She was so scared then that her brain lost control of itself and lost all rationality. And then, Gu Mingming widened her eyes and looked around, shouting, "Elvis! Where is Elvis?" Someone pressed on her head and a figure shrouded her from behind. He took Gu Mingming from Li's arms and placed her on his chest. He kissed Gu Mingming's little face and said in a hoarse voice with a tinge of laziness, "I'm fine, don't panic." Gu Mingming hugged Elvis back tightly and heaved a long sigh of relief. When her heartbeat returned to normal, Gu Mingming then said, "I remember, you vomited blood." Elvis played with Gu Mingming's long hair and replied softly, "Yeah. Did I hurt you?" Gu Mingming lowered her head, her heart filled with guilt. "You clearly told me not to release my beast pressure so easily, but I'm sorry." Chapter 650. Leah stood at the side and chuckled, looking at her with a gentle gaze. This stray beast attack may have been a disaster to Saint Nazir, but to Elvis and Leah, it was salvation. In this battle, Gu Mingming's emotions suppressed by Snake's memories seemed to have been released. She gradually revealed her original self, be it anger, worry, or shyness. They knew that their Gu Mingming was slowly returning to her. This was a good thing, although the price was a little heavy. Elvis kissed Gu Mingming until her entire body went limp, before releasing her reluctantly. Gently wiping away the saliva at the side of her lips, he smiled as if he had not had enough. Gu Mingming straightened her body, lowered her head and asked softly, "Kanwu?" Elvis's smile instantly turned cold. His gaze drifted to a place not far away, his voice carrying a strange calmness as he said, "I found him, he's fine." Gu Mingming heaved a sigh of relief, finally calming down completely. Raising her head, Gu Mingming looked around, realizing that she was no longer at the place where she was ambushed by the stray beasts that night. That's right, blood flowed like a river there. The first thing Elvis and the rest did when they woke up was naturally to leave as soon as possible, in case the stray beasts had any more tricks up their sleeves. Gu Mingming wanted to stand up to check on the children, but after supporting herself, she realized that her entire body was so weak that it was almost impossible for her to stand up. Leah carried Gu Mingming up and said, "Snake's power far exceeds the limits of what your body can handle. Forcefully unleashing his power has damaged your meridians. If not for the Beast King's regenerative abilities, you would have already been smashed into a pool of blood by the beast pressure you released." Gu Mingming did not struggle, she just secretly turned back to look at Elvis. Something was wrong. In the past, as long as Elvis was around, he would never let anyone carry her, but today he had handed himself over to Leah. And when he stood up, he actually held onto a tree. Although it did not look like much effort, but when had Elvis ever held onto anything to stand up? Something was wrong, something was definitely wrong. If, even with the Beast King's powers protecting her, she almost turned into a pool of blood, then how badly injured was Elvis, who forced himself to approach her while she was in a daze? "Hubby." Gu Mingming bit her lower lip but could not say a word. Elvis looked up, his blue eyes were filled with indulgence and love as tranquil as the night sky. He stretched his hand out to caress Gu Mingming's little face, asking, "Do you want me to hug you?" As Elvis spoke, he reached out his hand to receive Gu Mingming. Gu Mingming clearly felt Li's hesitation. It had nothing to do with jealousy, he was worried about Elvis's health. Gu Mingming shook her head. She stretched out one hand with her palm facing up. "I want to hold hands." "All right." Elvis's large hand held Gu Mingming's little hand gently. He turned it around and placed the back of her hand by his lips, kissing it. Then, as if he was looking at the most precious treasure in the world, he held her little hand tightly in his palm. Leah and Elvis brought Gu Mingming to a big tree not far away. Hada was carrying Qi Xian in his arms, sitting under the tree in a daze. Jiaoyu saw Gu Mingming from afar and rushed over. As for Kanwu, he was tied up with tree vines and hung upside down on a tree. Chapter 651. You. Gu Mingming was confused and asked, "Why are you here?" "I was worried about you. So I asked Barit to take care of my tribesmen for the time being. Once I see that you have safely returned to Saint Nazir, I will return to Sauter. During this period of time, Barit has given my tribesmen a lot of prey and I will repay him double before winter." Burke was still sitting under the tree, looking up at Gu Mingming with a faint smile but not moving closer. Gu Mingming nodded, indicating that she understood. Then she looked at Elvis and then at Leah, asking, "Who hung Kanwu on the tree?" "Me," Elvis said with a hoarse voice. Gu Mingming frowned and turned back to meet Elvis's blue eyes. He was injured because of her, so she could not bring herself to criticize him. Gu Mingming pursed her lips and swallowed most of her words back into her stomach. She just said, "The child is still young. If he has done anything wrong, we can slowly teach him. Let him down first." Elvis took 2 steps forward and stopped in front of Kanwu. He turned around and leaned against the tree trunk. The sunlight shone through the layers of tree shadows and the mottled rays of light landed on his surroundings. He placed his slender hands on Kanwu's back and gave him a nonchalant push. "Rascal, do you think you can come down now?" Kanwu bit his lips and swayed for a long time before stabilizing his body. He raised his head stubbornly and looked at Gu Mingming. His azure blue eyes were like the sky that had been washed by water, so clean and clear that his sadness was clearly visible. Gu Mingming's heart twitched under Kanwu's gaze. She instinctively wanted to hug him in her arms and comfort him, but before she could raise her hand she heard Kanwu say with a thick nasal voice, "Mummy, I'm sorry. It's all because I overestimated myself and charged into the battlefield recklessly, implicating you in danger. My tribesmen paid a painful price for my recklessness and you were unconscious for 2 days and 2 nights because of it. I did something wrong and should be punished. Please don't plead for me, let me bear the responsibility myself." Gu Mingming's heart ached terribly. Leah carried Gu Mingming to Kanwu's side as if he could read her mind. Gu Mingming hugged Kanwu in her arms and patted his back lightly, saying, "Silly child, it's not your fault. The stray beast suddenly attacked us. You just wanted to protect Mother and the rest of the people. There's nothing wrong with that. You can't be blamed." Kanwu's tears, which he had been holding back for 2 days, broke down at Gu Mingming's gentle words. He wailed at the top of his voice until he could not make a sound. His face was red and he looked like he was about to suffocate. Gu Mingming's heart ached terribly and she hurriedly coaxed him, "Kanwu, don't cry, be good." Kacha, the tree vines binding Kanwu broke apart. Gu Mingming was not mentally prepared and her body was weak, so she did not manage to hold on to Kanwu, causing him to fall onto the ground in a pathetic manner. This time, Kanwu was in a daze from the fall and he even forgot to cry. He stared at Elvis, who was standing in front of him with his azure blue eyes. He was so stunned that he did not know how to react. Elvis tilted his head and frowned. His eyes were cold and his entire body was emitting a sinister aura. It would not be surprising if he raised his leg and stomped Kanwu to death in the next second. He was born as a wolf, yet he cried so stupidly. And he's even my son. How annoying. Chapter 652. Gu Mingming bit her lower lip and frowned, but she did not say a word. Being educated by a father was a key factor for a child, especially a boy, to establish the foundation of his personality. She could no longer remember what a father's reprimand looked like. But her son should not be like her. Elvis slowly squatted down, his face still shrouded in a layer of darkness. He looked at Kanwu with an unfriendly gaze that even carried a murderous aura. You should think of ways to make up for your mistake if you know you made a mistake, and not apologize while shedding cowardly tears. Kanwu's tears were still welling up in his eyes, but he stubbornly bit his lip and forced his tears back. He just glared at Elvis as if he wanted to use this method to prove that he was different from what Elvis had said. Elvis sneered and pinched Kanwu's little face. He said with some disdain, Your eyes are not bad. But it is not wise to provoke a strong opponent that you cannot defeat. I will surpass you one day. One day. Kanwu roared. Elvis stretched out his sharp claws and swung it at Kanwu's back. Kanwu instinctively wanted to dodge, but he clenched his teeth and shut his eyes, using all his strength to control his body. He could not dodge, he could not run away. Otherwise, it would be equivalent to admitting defeat. There was no pain as he imagined. Kanwu secretly opened one eye and realized that the tree vines binding him had already broken into pieces, while he was completely unharmed. Elvis stood up and turned his back to Kanwu. He glanced sideways at him coldly and said, "The more afraid you are, the more you have to remain calm. Closing your eyes in front of a strong opponent is equivalent to giving up your own life." Kanwu staggered to stand up, his little fists hanging by his sides. His shoulders were raised and his chin was tucked into his collarbone. He looked up and glared at Elvis fiercely. Elvis turned around and did not look at Kanwu anymore. He said calmly, "You did not do anything wrong by rushing into the battlefield. Because my son is never a weakling that needs protection. Your fault is that you are not strong enough." Kamwa's little body seemed to be bearing a huge weight. His arms were trembling from his tightly clenched fists. He no longer roared but was unbelievably calm. His voice was calm and not timid. He said, "Hey, will you teach me? Teach me to become stronger." Elvis let out a low laugh. He turned around and glanced sideways, his lips curving into a contemptuous smile. His voice was full of sarcasm as he said, "On what basis?" Kamwa lowered her head and did not look at Elvis anymore. After staying silent for a while, she spoke again, "Before I surpass you, can you protect my mother well? If you weren't my son, these words would be enough for me to kill you." Kamwa took a step forward and raised her head to look at Elvis. There was an expression on her face that did not match her age. She was simply a miniature version of Elvis, with the same cold smile, the same disdain and the same provocation. "Why do you have to say it as if you love me? You didn't kill me because you didn't want Mom to be sad." Elvis chuckled, admitting it. Kamwa took another step forward and stared straight at Elvis. "I will defeat you, I definitely will." Elvis's face was filled with disdain as he said, "Just a little brat who only knows how to cry when something happens? Alright, since you're my son, I'll wait and see." Chapter 653. Gu Mingming really wanted to stay and comfort her son, but Elvis had just educated Kanwu. If she were to comfort him now, it would be very disadvantageous in terms of education. The child would think that he had his mother's support, and would then doubt and challenge his father's authority. Especially in the beast world where female supremacy was so extreme that it was a little perverted, her skills could possibly make Kanwu look down on everyone else. Although she could not completely agree with Elvis's hegemonic education, it was undeniable that in the beast world where there was no law, power meant everything. Either win or surrender, there was no third way. Peace. After experiencing so much, if she still hoped for everyone to reach a consensus after a battle of words on the negotiation table, then she was not simple, she was stupid. Leah carried Gu Mingming in his arms, but was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he looked at Burke who was sitting quietly by the tree root, his eyes almost glued to Gu Mingming. He said, "Since you saved my little cub in return, you don't have to return the prey that Barit took care of your tribesmen. But, the way you look at my Gu Mingming makes me very unhappy. If you still want your eyes, you better not let me see Gu Mingming's shadow in those eyes." Burke was still sitting there without moving. He shifted his gaze to meet Lee's but did not avoid him. After adjusting his breathing, he said slowly, "Me saving Kanwu and asking Barit to take care of my tribesmen is my own business, you don't have to thank me." Leah laughed coldly and said, "You misunderstood, this is not gratitude, it's a reward. Kanwu is the son of the messenger, anyone who saves him will be rewarded." What he meant was, you are not special. You saved the son of the messenger of the beast deity, Saint Nazir tribe will reward you as per usual. This was public versus private. Don't expect to use this matter to have any personal interactions with Gu Mingming. Burke was not a fool, Lee's words were so clear, there was no reason for him not to understand. But all the males in this world were the same, if he was in Lee's shoes, he might be even more ruthless, or even get rid of Gu Mingming before she woke up. After all, Gu Mingming did not know he was here. Burke's gaze slowly returned to Gu Mingming's face, waiting for her to say something. Gu Mingming's attitude, she turned her head around and rested her head on Lee's shoulder. She leaned her head against Lee's neck and closed her eyes, ignoring him. Leah chuckled and returned his gaze to Burke with a tinge of disdain. "Tell that person that it's not wise to use a counterfeit to fight another counterfeit." With that, he turned around and left. Elvis did not express his stance at all. He just walked back with Leah the moment he turned around. Huda and his brothers looked at each other, before finally carrying Qixin and following Gu Mingming from afar. Kamwa was the last to leave. As if he had made a decision, he turned around and ran back to Berg. Chapter 654. Sometimes, Gu Mingming wished that she had not inherited Snake's abilities so thoroughly. If she did not have such sharp observational skills, she might have joked around with Oriton and teased him for being a glutton with facial paralysis. But, what should she do? She could clearly see the signs of serious injuries on Oriton's body. Most importantly, those injuries were not external wounds. Was this the result of the beast pressure eruption? Harming the enemy by 1,000, harming oneself by 800. She felt guilty because she could not control her emotions for a moment and brought disaster to the tribe. Everyone pretended that everything was fine in front of her, just like after the battle with Cole, she did not see Barit and the rest for a long time. Afterward, they appeared as if nothing had happened, but the faintly discernible sense of weakness could not be hidden. This time was it the same? Afraid that it would affect her mood, they all pretended to be fine in front of her? Then should she cooperate and play dumb so that she would not let their arrangements down? Gu Mingming's lips curled up and her eyes curved into crescents. She said, "All right, I have not eaten hot pot for a long time." Leah placed Gu Mingming in a huge tree hole. This tree hole was not formed naturally and was obviously dug out later. The thick scent of fresh trees had yet to dissipate. Dried grass was laid at the bottom of the tree hole and Gu Mingming only felt that it was soft as she sat on it. Her body leaned to the side lightly. The surroundings of the tree hole were wrapped tightly and softly by beast skin. Sniffing carefully, there was Lee's scent on it. It should have been dug out before she woke up. Elvis sat beside Gu Mingming's legs with his back against the tree trunk. He placed one hand gently on Gu Mingming's knee and closed his eyes to enjoy the sunlight and her fragrance. Gu Mingming reached out and caressed the side of Elvis's face, her gaze filled with heartache. Feeling that Gu Mingming was looking at him, Elvis slowly opened his eyes. A pair of blue eyes met Gu Mingming's clear eyes accurately. The corners of his lips curled up and his voice had a tinge of demonic charm and dispiritedness. It was slightly hoarse but full of knowledge. He said, "Looking at me like this, do you want it?" Gu Mingming was stunned for a moment, unable to react. Elvis supported himself with one hand on the ground and the other on the side of Gu Mingming's ear. His entire body leaned forward and he half knelt with his slender legs, using his knee to press against the edge of the tree hole between Gu Mingming's legs. A simple action had forced Gu Mingming's body to an angle where she could not retreat. The last time was in the Snake King Valley. In order to improve your blood circulation. I have indeed abstained from eating meat for too long. As Elvis said, he bent down and kissed Gu Mingming's neck, leaving a fiery red kiss mark on her snow-white neck, alluring and eye-catching. Elvis raised his head slightly and licked Gu Mingming's right earlobe with the tip of his tongue. Seeing her trembling like a startled rabbit, he could not help but chuckle and said, "You're so sensitive, it's really because you've held it in for too long, it's my fault for this, so, Xiaoming, how do you want to punish me?" Gu Mingming placed her little hand on Elvis's chest. She wanted to push him away but did not dare to. She was afraid that if she didn't control her strength properly, it would worsen his injuries. She bit her lower lip and said, "Don't mess around. I'm serious." Chapter 655. Gu Mingming lowered her head, her face flushed red as she mumbled softly, "There's poison on my body, it's fatal, I know." As Elvis spoke, he kissed his way down her neck, the tip of his tongue gently brushing past Gu Mingming's collarbone. With a hoarse voice he said, "But I'm willing." Gu Mingming placed her hands on Elvis's shoulders, her body trembling uncontrollably. Biting her lower lip, Gu Mingming's eyes were misty as she said, "But I'm not willing." Elvis paused and straightened his back. He hooked Gu Mingming's chin with one hand and stared at her tearful little face. "Are you despising me?" Gu Mingming shook her head, not daring to look at Elvis's eyes. She said softly, "I know you're injured and it's hard for you to stand and walk, right? But if you don't want to tell me, I won't ask. So, don't use this method to cover up, it makes my heart ache." Elvis's heart ached at Gu Mingming's words. The current her wasn't someone he could hide from just by pretending to be fine, right? He clearly knew everything but he had to keep it all in his heart, forcing a smile and playing along with them in exchange for their peace of mind. Elvis hugged Gu Mingming in his arms, whispering into her ear, "I really hate that snake. He made you so sharp, but didn't give you the corresponding intelligence." Gu Mingming was taken aback. She blinked her eyes, the worries in her heart dissipated by the second half of Elvis's sentence. Elvis let out a deep breath, then held onto Gu Mingming's shoulders. His blue eyes stared straight into her eyes, saying, "Don't you understand? I've already said. I'm willing." Gu Mingming felt that her brain was not working so well. She just felt her breathing was a little rushed. She stared straight into Elvis's eyes as if her soul was being sucked into his eyes. Elvis smiled gently and dotingly, rubbing Gu Mingming's little head, saying, "Dying from your domestic violence might be the happiest way to die in this world. If it's you, you're willing to do anything. Death is fine too." Gu Mingming's heart felt like it was being gripped tightly. He did not roar like Ma Jingtao. Every word he said was calm and gentle, but it was like a gentle hand holding onto Gu Mingming's heart steadily. Gently retracting his fingers, Her heart was so sensitive that it felt like it was about to explode. Gu Mingming raised her arms and hugged Elvis back, burying her little face in the crook of Elvis's neck as she shed her first tears since leaving the Snake King Valley. Hubby. What should I do? I'm so scared. I don't know what happened. I couldn't control my emotions. What if one day I accidentally kill you? Gu Mingming was crying while Elvis was smiling. Finally, the sealed door that was forged by Snake's 1,000 years of loneliness was pushed open a small gap. His Gu Mingming was escaping from that crack. As long as he could grab her hand, it didn't matter whether he pulled her out or accompanied her in. Chapter 656. Leah walked over and leaned against the tree trunk, chuckling, all right, I will be jealous if you continue like this." Elvis snorted softly and stood up slowly. Gu Mingming could tell that Elvis's injuries were definitely not healed and he was putting on a brave front. Leah carried Gu Mingming out from the tree hole and tapped on her little nose, saying, "Elvis is a 5th-level orc. Although his injuries are not light, his recovery speed is already very shocking. Moreover, don't you still have me around? I will not give him a chance to die in front of me and then watch you cry your heart out for him." Gu Mingming knew that Leah was purposely using such a sour tone to comfort her so that she could quickly recover from her sadness. Wiping her tears, Gu Mingming wrapped her arms around Lee's neck and asked, "What about you? Were your injuries very serious?" Leah chuckled with an awkward expression, replying, "I am not Elvis," forcefully enduring his beast pressure and refusing to give in, forcing himself to hug you when you were releasing your beast pressure. Gu Mingming remembered that if Elvis had not hugged her at that time, she did not know how long she would have lost control of her emotions. Elvis took 2 steps forward, holding Gu Mingming's little hand and kissed it, saying, "Once you released your beast pressure," he immediately reverted to his original form and fainted. Leah snorted through his nose and turned his face to the side, revealing his embarrassment. Sitting around the fire pit, Leah placed Gu Mingming down properly before starting to add meat into the pot. The soup that had already been prepared was giving off a thick bone aroma, stimulating one's appetite. Oriton used 2 peeled tree branches to make chopsticks, picking up the meat while telling Gu Mingming, "Yeah, what Elvis said is true. I fainted about a breath later than Leah and also reverted to my original form and lost consciousness." Gu Mingming facepalmed, feeling a little speechless. Oriton's poker face and reporting while eating the meat gave off an inexplicable sense of hilarity. Leah rolled his eyes at Oriton, clenched his teeth and quickly snatched a large piece of meat that Oriton had boiled, placing it into a small wooden bowl, blowing on it to warm it before sending it to Gu Mingming's mouth, saying while feeding her, say it, you can mock me however you like, don't stand on ceremony. Anyway, I rely on my face to make a living, not my abilities. Right, Ming?" Gu Mingming chuckled as a memory belonging to Snake flashed across her mind. That time, Snake also emitted his beast pressure to bully Elvis and Leah. Afterward, this fellow wagged his tail and snuggled into her arms to act cute. At that time, Snake even suspected that he was a snake and roared in his heart, "You're weak and you're still in the right?" Although Leah said that he did not mind, he snatched the meat that Oriton had cooked piece by piece. He did not eat it himself and fed it all into Gu Mingming's mouth. This caused Oriton to be unable to vent his anger. After all, he was a male and could not possibly get angry just because a female ate a little of his meat, right? But Lee's despicable look was really infuriating. Oriton lifted his head and stared at Leah. His brows were slightly furrowed. For someone with facial paralysis like him, this was already a very serious expression. Chapter 657. Oriton clenched his teeth and cooked another piece of meat. He did not eat it himself and just placed it in Gu Mingming's bowl. Then he looked at Leah with a blank expression and said, "You don't rely on your looks to make a living, you rely on your cheap cough." Gu Mingming choked on Oriton's words and almost spat out the meat she had just swallowed. Previously, Oriton had also called Leah a despicable with a straight face. A knife-wielding hero. Gu Mingming thought that Leah would be angry and drag Oriton to a duel to clear his name. In the end, this guy turned his head in an extremely coquettish manner and looked at her with a face full of grievance. He said like a pet dog, "Mingming, he bullied me." The corners of Gu Mingming's mouth twitched. Not knowing whether to laugh or cry, she asked, So you want me to beat him up for you?" Leah looked at Gu Mingming seriously, then nodded his head resolutely. Yes, he nodded. Gu Mingming held her forehead and forced herself to raise her arm. "My limbs are weak now." Leah pulled Gu Mingming into his arms and kissed her little face lightly. His bewitching red lips inched closer and he licked the meat juice on the side of Gu Mingming's lips, before retracting his tongue back into his mouth. Then he moved his thin lips close to her ear and muttered softly, "The way you eat is too alluring, I don't want others to see it. In the future, let's not let Orton share meals with us, alright?" Gu Mingming was speechless. Green veins popped up on Orton's forehead as he glared at Leah, looking like he was about to charge forward and fight Leah to the death. What kind of joke was this? Snatching food from the tiger's mouth? But Leah didn't mind. He glanced sideways at Orton and chuckled. "Praise me or else. Once Mingming opens her mouth there's no turning back. A hot pot barbecue stewed pork knuckle. I wonder what delicacies Mingming will bring later. If I can't eat them, won't you regret it?" Orton clenched his teeth and fiercely squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. "You win." Leah chuckled, then looked at Orton with an evil expression. "You're quite tactful, aren't you? Since you've already submitted, I'll be magnanimous and not stoop to pettiness. I won't let Ming forbid you from coming to our house to eat." Orton really could not stand Lee's smug look, so he turned his face to the side and stretched out his bowl. "Give me the meat." Leah snorted arrogantly, then quickly scooped up all the meat from the pot and placed it into Gu Mingming's bowl. "You are not even my female and you still want me to take care of you? Don't you have any shame?" On Orton's forehead, there was a thick and large tick mark. Damn it, being scolded as shameless by a shameless person was so frustrating. Gu Mingming chuckled. She picked up a large piece of meat from her bowl and placed it in Orton's bowl. "Stop fooling around. Hurry and eat." Orton looked at the meat in his bowl, and his expression became a little better. He responded with a "hmm," and picked up the meat with his chopsticks and sent it into his mouth. Then, the meat was snatched away from his mouth, a long wretched face appeared in front of him, chewing the piece of meat that was supposed to be in his mouth with great relish. He even purposely made chewing noises. "If a tiger doesn't roar, do you really think I'm a Hello Kitty?" Orton leaped up and chased after Leah to attack. Leah dodged left and right but did not really retaliate. He just fooled around. Elvis sat beside Gu Mingming, holding the bowl and chopsticks that Leah had stuffed into his arms. He picked up a piece of meat that was just the right temperature and sent it into Gu Mingming's mouth. Seeing her helpless smile, his gaze also softened. Luckily in this house, there was still Leah who knew how to divert her attention and make her happy. She smiled again. "How nice. Aside from the topic, I saw the comments from my babies. They were all talking about Gu Mingming's recent emotional problems. Don't worry, this is a serious and joyful article, not a heavy one. Gu Mingming was just not used to the sudden addition of over 1,000 years of memories because Snake had just died. She would slowly get better. Besides, Cole, that sly fox, was quite annoying. In comparison, the previous Nina was just trash and could not be compared at all." Sigh, the author had already spoken, which meant that today's update had ended. Chapter 658. What caused Orton and Lee's quarrel to end was Burke, who was being supported by Kanwu and Jiaoyu as they walked closer. Huda carried Qixin in his arms and walked in front of Gu Mingming. He looked at Gu Mingming with his clear and bright eyes and asked, "Mummy, can we invite Kanwu's master for a meal?" "Master?" Gu Mingming frowned and asked. Kanwu walked in front of Gu Mingming, treating Elvis, who was sitting beside Gu Mingming, as though he was invisible. Kanwu's eyes, which were 80% similar to Elvis's, carried a stubbornness that did not belong to his age. He said, "Master Burke was injured while trying to save me, so he is temporarily unable to hunt. I feel that I should at least be able to afford his food before he recovers, but the current me is still too weak. Mom, can you allow Master Borg to eat with us for a while?" Gu Mingming placed her hand lightly on Kanwu's head and rubbed it gently. "It's a good character to be grateful. Mummy will definitely support you." Kanwu pounced into Gu Mingming's arms and hugged Gu Mingming's neck tightly with his little hands. He pressed his chubby little face against Gu Mingming's and mumbled for a while before saying, "Mummy, thank you." Gu Mingming chuckled and hugged her awkward son back. She looked up at the pale-faced Burke and said, "Sit, let's eat together." Burke took a step forward, but Leah stood in front of him and said coldly, "I remember I have already paid you." Burke's gaze was filled with a sense of inferiority. Of course he knew the difference between him and Leah, not to mention Elvis, who was sitting beside Gu Mingming. He also knew that it was not good to be greedy, so when Gu Mingming asked him to follow them to St. Nazaire, he almost wanted to agree without caring about anything else. However, during the days in Sauter, he gradually understood what kind of person Cole was who had guided him to Gu Mingming's side. He did not know what kind of role he was playing in Cole's chessboard. He was extremely afraid that he would become a chess piece to hurt Gu Mingming. So he chose to stay away from her and watched her leave. But he couldn't control his heart. He desperately wanted to get closer to her. Just a little bit would do. Not knowing what tricks Cole would play on her, he was really worried about her safety. That was why he had come. He had quietly followed behind the group and watched them from afar. They were so far away that they could only see the sesame-sized shadow of the last person in the group. Only then would they not be discovered. Until he noticed the stray beast's attack, his brain almost lost control. Even though he knew how dangerous the stray beasts were, he still charged over without hesitation. Seeing Kanwu being attacked by two stray beasts, the combination of their moves was almost fatal. He did not have Elvis's ability and could not counter this attack. The only way was to block it for him. He knew that even he would die if he were to take this attack head-on. But all she could think of was Gu Mingming's sad and helpless gaze as she hugged Qixuan. She already had a son whose life or death was unknown. She couldn't have another one. As long as she could be well, she would let him die for Kanwu. Chapter 659. Jiaoyu took 2 steps forward and gently tugged on Li's beast-skin skirt. He looked up at Leah with a pair of eyes that was extremely similar to Gu Mingming's. If you chase Burke away, Kanwu will definitely starve with him. As brothers, we will advance and retreat together with Kanwu. If all 4 sons have nothing to eat at the same time, who do you think will feel heartache? Leah raised his brows and looked down at Jiaoyu with a smile. Are you threatening me? Jiaoyu did not deny it. He just looked up at Leah. I heard that you are always showing off, saying that mother is always biased towards you. Leah chuckled and responded with a sounding a little proud. Jiaoyu said, then what if the 4 of us hug mother and cry together? If we say that you are bullying us, who do you think mother will be biased towards? Li's eyelids twitched. He stared at Jiaoyu with a dangerous gaze. Rascal, you are playing with fire. Jiaoyu shrugged. Stop pretending. You can't do anything to my eyes. Leah gritted his teeth. He thought he had put on a good disguise. In the end, this rascal had grasped his weakness. Yes, he could not harden his heart to do anything when facing this pair of eyes that looked exactly like Cheng Mingming's. Jiaoyu continued. Let Burke stay for a meal. Otherwise, I will tell mother that you beat us up. Leah raised his brows. Was he trying to create an injustice? Since when did he beat them up? Jiaoyu said, also you and Auntie Mandy were exchanging flirtatious glances. Li's eyes widened. He instantly understood Jiaoyu's intentions. Gu Mingming's hearing was different from before. She could hear every single word that this rascal was saying. Jiaoyu raised his little face and smiled brightly. But there was a small evil glint in his eyes. You even called out a female's name when you were asleep. Something Jillian? The veins on Li's forehead twitched. This little wolf cub was really good at making up lies. Who could he not mention? Why did he have to mention Jillian, the snow fox that he was engaged to? Jiaoyu wanted to say more, but Leah covered his mouth and gave in with a black face. Let him eat, all right? If you keep lying, your mother is going to explode. Jiaoyu smiled triumphantly and gently slapped Li's wrist away. He turned around and walked back. After taking 2 steps, he turned back and lightly patted Li's shoulder. With a sincere and earnest look, he said, I am also doing this for my brother, I have no choice. You don't have to take it to heart. In any case, you wouldn't dare to kill me. Also, your mother is going to explode. Your whole tribe is going to explode. With that, Jiaoyu sighed maturely and walked back to Burke's side. He held onto one of his arms and said, my mother's males don't have normal brains. Don't bother with lunatics. Since my mom said you can stay for dinner, you can eat without worry. After all, my mother is the one who calls the shots in this family. Kanwu stood up from Gu Mingming's arms. He hesitated for a moment before kissing Gu Mingming on the cheek. Without saying a word, he walked to the other side of Burke and sat beside the fire with Jiaoyu on Burke's left and right. Huda handed Qixuan over to Jiaoyu. Then he went to fetch the bowls and chopsticks. He scooped up some meat from the pot and filled 4 small bowls. He passed them to his brothers and Burke respectively. Then he carried Qixuan back into his arms. All right, let's eat. Aside from the topic. Chapter 660. The atmosphere during this meal was rather strange. Oriton glared at Leah, looking as if he had a poker face and was unable to satisfy his craving. Leah and Elvis's sharp gazes could not wait to poke Burke's body into a honeycomb coal. chewing mouthfuls as if it was Burke's bones instead of meat. Burke and the three little ones ate quietly, trying their best to control their eyes, but still could not help but stare at Gu Mingming. Gu Mingming face-bombed, wishing that her observation skills were not so sharp. She just wanted to have a good meal. Reaching out to hug Kanwu, Gu Mingming realized that the meat in his bowl was barely touched, so she asked with concern, "Why aren't you eating?" Kanwu lowered his head and stared at the meat in his bowl, replying, "Master Burke was invited back by me, so my portion is for Master Burke to eat." Gu Mingming frowned, feeling a little heartache. She knew that Elvis's education was too forceful, causing a lot of psychological pressure on this child. But she could not say that Elvis was wrong in front of the child, so she could only comfort him. "Silly son, Burke saved you, so he is our family's benefactor. Even if you did not invite him back, Mummy will not watch him starve. So you don't have to save your own food for him, just eat obediently, alright?" Kamwa looked up at Gu Mingming but lowered his head again. Shaking his little head, he said, "No, I will repay my own kindness." Gu Mingming did not miss the way Kanwu glanced at Elvis from the corner of his eyes when he said that. Gu Mingming's heart ached for her son, and even the way she looked at Elvis was a little sad. Elvis sighed as if he was admitting defeat, but did not say anything else. Kamwa looked up at Gu Mingming, saying with an extremely serious face, "Mummy, I have Burke as my master, he will teach me how to become stronger. From tomorrow onwards we will start practicing from hunting. So don't worry, I can take responsibility for my own decision." How could a child who was not even a year old talk about taking responsibility? It made one's heart ache to hear it. Gu Mingming hugged her son into her arms, then gave half of the meat in her bowl to Kanwu, saying, "How about this, you give your portion to Burke, Mummy will give you half of her portion. How about this?" Kanwu shook his head and poured the meat back into Gu Mingming's bowl. He looked at Gu Mingming with a clear and determined gaze and said, "I'm a male beast, how can I snatch a female's food? Mom, you're making me feel useless." Gu Mingming bit her lower lip. She really wanted to borrow a cell phone to surf the internet and post a thread asking, what to do if the child is too headstrong? Which family's son entered the rebellious phase at the age of 1? Please enlighten me. I'm waiting online. It's urgent. Elvis slowly stood up and walked to Gu Mingming's side. He kicked Kanwu to the ground before lifting up the bowl and directly pouring the meat into his mouth. His large hand covered Kanwu's mouth like a pair of metal pincers. "Just eat when I ask you to, don't make my wife worry." Kanwu's eyes were red, but he stubbornly refused to cry. He swallowed the meat in his mouth without even chewing it. When Gu Mingming pushed Elvis away and hugged Kanwu, he had already swallowed the food in his mouth. Elvis placed the empty bowl down for her to see and said gently, "All right, he has eaten. Don't worry." Chapter 661. Elvis was speechless from the scolding. He looked at the empty bowl and did not know what to do. Giving the wolf pups meat was also wrong? Kanwu bit his lower lip and forcibly held back his tears. He said, "Mummy, don't be angry. The weak do not have the right to resist. One day, I will become stronger and never let you worry about me again." With that, he suddenly stood up and ran out. Gu Mingming wanted to chase after him but fell to the side the moment she stood up. Luckily, Elvis was not far away and caught Gu Mingming. Gu Mingming wanted to push Elvis away, but after hearing that groan, she looked to the side and saw that Elvis's head was covered in fine beads of sweat. She recalled that he still had injuries that had not healed because of her loss of control. It was already so difficult for him to stand and walk, it must be even more difficult for her to catch a free fall. Gu Mingming could only watch worriedly as Kanwu ran far away. She bit her lower lip and could not say a word. Burke stood up with Jiaoyu's help and walked to Gu Mingming's side. Standing shoulder to shoulder with her, he said, "Don't worry, I will take care of him." Gu Mingming looked to the side at Burke. Now, there was no better way. "Sorry to trouble you." Burke chuckled. "If you had not unleashed your king's aura, I would definitely not have been able to withstand the second blow from those two stray beasts. So, actually you saved my life. To repay you, taking care of Kanwu is not a big deal. He is a very sensible child." With that, Burke walked in the direction where Kanwu had disappeared. Huda carried Qixin and walked to Gu Mingming. He raised his little face and said, "Mummy, your body is too weak. You need to rest and recuperate. I will help you look after your brothers and not let them cause any trouble. So, don't worry too much, alright?" Gu Mingming rubbed Huda's little head. Her heart was filled with guilt. If she had taken good care of her own sons back then and not let them experience that kidnapping and not let them witness her being tortured to death by Ellie, would they not have matured so early? Being forced to grow up was a psychological trauma. But she did not know how to make up for it. Huda looked at Elvis, then at Leah. He sighed and did not say anything. He just shook his head and walked away. The veins on Elvis's forehead twitched. He was going against the heavens. It was only until Burke and the three precocious kids had disappeared that Gu Mingming retracted her gaze and looked at Elvis. How badly are you injured? Don't lie to me. Tell me the truth. Elvis's heart skipped a beat. He thought that Leah and Oraton's banter had already settled this matter and Gu Mingming would not pursue the matter further. Frowning, Elvis started to dislike those wolf cubs even more. If Kamwu had not suddenly run away, causing Gu Mingming to almost lose her balance after getting up to chase after him, he would not have rushed over to hug Gu Mingming, causing pressure on his wound and causing Qing Mingming to worry. Chapter 662. Gu Mingming's heart skipped a beat as she frowned at Elvis. So serious? Elvis glared at Leah before caressing Gu Mingming's little face gently. I'm a 5th-level beast. Although he is not as good as you, he is still an outstanding figure. Don't listen to Lee's bluff, aren't I standing right here? Gu Mingming bit her lip and said, lie down over there. Elvis was taken aback by Gu Mingming's roar. Seeing the tears welling up in her eyes made him even more flustered and afraid than when she lost control and flew into a rage. Don't be angry, I'll lie down, okay? Elvis walked to the spot Gu Mingming pointed at and laid down obediently. He looked at Gu Mingming carefully and said, I'm lying down, do you want to come over? Gu Mingming sniffed and allowed Leah to carry her back to Elvis's side. Leah sat cross-legged on the ground while Gu Mingming sat in his arms. Her waist was supported firmly by Lee's large tail and she nestled in Lee's arms without using any strength. Why aren't you lying down properly when you're so badly injured? Gu Mingming was angry. She was angry at him for not taking care of his own body, and even angrier at herself for injuring him to this extent. Elvis looked at Gu Mingming with a deep gaze and said, I get flustered when I can't see you, so wherever you are, I will be. Silly wolf. Gu Mingming rubbed her eyes, then turned to look at Leah and asked, what about you? Was he really all right? You're not lying? I clearly saw those two stray beasts working together to kill you. Leah purposely said sourly, you only remember to care about me now? TSK. I thought I was an unloved one. You wouldn't care even if I died. Gu Mingming glared at Leah with a stern expression. Don't try to bluff your way out of this. Tell me the truth. Leah immediately kept his playful expression and shifted his gaze away timidly. He then secretly peeked at Gu Mingming from the corner of his eyes and said guiltily, my injuries are not as serious as Elvis's. I'm almost recovered. Really? Gu Mingming was skeptical. The two males in her family were too good at flaunting their superiority, always putting up a facade in front of her. Leah cleared his throat and said, most of my injuries are external injuries caused by those stray beasts. This kind of injury was common in the past. It didn't hurt much and he was used to it. I'll be fine in at most 3 to 5 days. Gu Mingming reached out and poked Lee's body a few times. Seeing that he was really fine, she heaved a sigh of relief. Then what about Elvis? Is it good for us to just wait for him like this? Leah nodded. Don't worry, the most dangerous period is over. Now that he can stand, walk and talk, it proves that he won't die. Actually, Leah didn't say anything. In order to recall Gu Mingming's consciousness and prevent her from being smashed into minced meat by the explosive force that was too much for her body to handle, Elvis endured the intense pain and walked to Gu Mingming's side. Not only were his bones injured, his organs were also injured. If Gu Mingming had held back her pressure a second later, Elvis's heart would have shattered into pieces. By then he might not even have a complete corpse. Although he had the recovery ability of a 5th-level beast, Elvis's injuries were too severe. He did not agree with Elvis pretending to be fine in front of Gu Mingming from the start and told him to rest well, but he did not listen and insisted on staying by Gu Mingming's side to prove that he was fine and not make her feel guilty. What was the result? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.